philosophy. And what was its contemporary forms? How similar was it to the lifestyle of Jesus? You could see all of these things as an expression of Hellenistic philosophy occurring at the time. What does that mean? Enormous consequences to that. It's separating it from Judaism. That's the biggest thing that's happened in many, many years. Now look here. At one time, you see, Christianity could include within itself Neoplatonic philosophy. It included it. It included it up to the 15th century. Actually, 16th century, excuse me. Right. And it wasn't until Valla, a very great humanist at the time, who knew Greek well, Latin well, he looked at the material that was called the writings of Pseudo-Dionysius, Dionysius at the time, who was said to be the companion of St. Paul, and he said, excuse me, these writings are all forgeries. We have to call them Pseudo-Dionysius, they're not genuine. What did that do, this minor little thing? Well, St. Thomas Aquinas, Albert Magnus, people like that, especially St. Thomas Aquinas, quoted Dionysius 1,700 times in his Summa Theologica. What was the impact of that? It separated the writings of Dionysius from the core of Christian thought. Even though it formally developed it, molded it, influenced it for 800 years. There was another thing that was interesting. Early Christians thought that they could absorb Christianity, that Christianity could absorb the Hellenic period under the assumption that there was a parallel tradition going on. One revealed by faith, one revealed partial, they called it partial revelation brought about by understanding. They could line up their philosophers, they could line up their prophets, they could see correspondences between the two, and that was called the dual tradition, dual revelation. That was a major thought. Now, St. Augustine accepted it, Lactantius accepted it, the Church Fathers accepted it, and therefore they could say one more thing which was totally interesting. They could show that some of the writings of the Christians anticipated by many hundreds of years the writings of the philosophers. Therefore, they could feel confident that they had a revealed system of theology that could compete with the Greeks and yet had the same origin, since they thought both of these points met at the time of Moses. That was called the dual tradition. And that went on until the 17th century. Isaiah Casaubon, or Casaubon, in the 17th century, took a look at this claim and said, excuse me, gentlemen, everything that you're doing is quite interesting, but the dates are all wrong. You got them all wrong. He reestablished a dating system, and he showed that this hypothesis must be rejected. What did it reject? It rejected, therefore, the need in the universities to study these people. Therefore, it devalued these thinkers, and therefore they didn't play any major role in the culture itself. It was confined in some places to universities and seminaries, but it no longer played the major role it once had. There was a period of time in the 16th century, especially the 16th, early 16th century, that many bishops, a very nice number of them in France, thought that the best way to understand Christianity was the Neoplatonism. There was no doubt about it in their mind, since Ficino, who we mentioned before, translated all of Plato in the 16th century, and his Plato was the ruling Plato for hundreds of years. He translated into Latin, and he translated the whole corpus. He developed the whole thing. And he was a churchman. He was a churchman. He was a canon of the church. He was a churchman. And therefore, they didn't see any reason why a person couldn't simultaneously be a Platonist as well as a Christian. It was accepted. Until Casaubon came along and said, excuse me, the hypothesis upon which you're resting, therefore, they dropped it. What are they dropping? They're dropping the richness of a tradition that molded them, because they want to keep this one idea that Christianity, scholarship can assert is true, that Christianity is intimately linked with Judaism and is its successor and can represent itself, therefore, as the fullest maturing of it. Wait a minute, modern scholarship, what's it doing now? In the last 15 years, no more than 15 years, it's showing that this is a myth. This is true. If this is true, then all of this now can be returned to. And if that's the case, if all of that can be returned to, then there must be a revival of Neoplatonic thought. And here's the big problem. And a chap by the name of Mack did a beautiful book called Q. He realizes this and he deals with the implications of it. And he says, you know what that really means? Painstakingly, he comes to this argument. And let me tell you how he concludes. It's a very interesting conclusion he does. Here, he does this. Since there are good arguments to reject from the sacred scriptures, all but Q. Q is what's genuine. Well, then he said, what's other than Q? Well, there's the parables, miracle stories, the passion. Passion, of course, means the arrest, the trial, the crucifixion, and that's separate from the post-resurrection scenes. Q has no passion material. Q has no resurrection story. The new gospel that's been discovered of Thomas, Gospel of Thomas, in the Nag Hammadi texts, 35% of Thomas is Q. Thomas has no passion and no crucifixion. Mark, the original Gospel of Mark, the earliest dating, the texts that are from the 4th to the 5th century, do not have a crucifixion. It all ends at 16:8. The last 12 lines have been added by other people, and they have a pretty good idea, curiously enough, about who did it and where it was done. Therefore, no Easter. No Easter. No passion, trial, death. What is it essentially? Q. What's Q? Cynic and Stoic philosophy. Implication. What's this other stuff? The mythical expression, using the word mythical in the best way, the mythical expression of a Cynic and Stoic philosophy. Bang. Isn't that interesting? Christianity, therefore, you can conclude by this argument that this material, the parables, the miracles, the passion, the crucifixion, the resurrection, is non-historical material that was added many years later, in some cases 300 to 400 years later, and therefore it's essentially a mythical account of what was essentially a Stoic and Cynic philosophy that was current at the time of Jesus. They know the places where it was studied, taught. It's the very same cities that Jesus went through with his earthly ministry. Therefore, what's the conclusion? There are two parts of Christianity, the mythical and the philosophical. Philosophical is Hellenistic. The mythical can express the local beliefs, both from Judaism and Gnostic redemption myths. Thank you. Done. Curious? That's where it's going. And if it goes in that direction, what is the implication? It's an enormous implication, isn't it? We have to redesign our curriculum. The impact on science is going to be interesting too, which we could spend a little while on, but I ran out of time. And how Gödel fits in this and other people of our contemporary thinkers is very interesting. Yes, pardon me, I interrupted.
Could you speak on that a bit?